Hello there, and welcome back to the third and final installment of my rather strange review of Dune 2021, in which I'll be going over 3 terrible things about the movie. What do I mean by terrible? Well, I mean things that should not have happened in any movie due to their social impact. Now, I've already gone over 3 things I really enjoyed and 3 things I felt were lacking from an artistic standpoint, and I'll be sure to link those in the description below. Though, before we can get round to discussing 3 terrible things about Dune, I of course need to give a content warning for the following topics: fatphobia, homophobia, paedophilia, persecution of people with albinism, physical othering, sexual assault, and toxic masculinity. Also, spoiler warning, not just for the movie but for the books as well, so you have been warned. If you like our work and appreciate the research put into each video, please consider supporting the channel via Patreon. You can also support us by liking, commenting, and sharing our work on social media. Bloody hell, it's been how many months since I did parts 1 and 2? 5 months? Yeah, sorry about that, that was not part of the original plan. But stuff sorta happened, work took priority, we might even be going to court, just a bunch of stuff that doesn't really relate to today's video, but I wanted to explain why it took me so long to get this video out there. As you might also notice, I'm not appearing in this video. This is due to a mix of reasons. Pretty much this is how I feel most comfortable presenting right now. I told myself it's either do it this way or sit on things until like a year passes, and I just wanted to get this video done, to be honest. So with that out of the way, let's move on to discuss 3 things Dune really fucked up, starting with what is perhaps the most in-your-face and yet under-discussed element regarding the movie's villain, Baron Harkonnen, and that is the movie's fatphobia. As noted in my 3 Great Things video, something I was really afraid of when it was first announced that Dune would be receiving a high-budget remake was the way in which Frank Herbert relied on homophobic tropes as a means of conveying Baron Harkonnen's evil nature. Herbert not only made the Baron his only gay character, but specifically made him a gay child predator, and I was worried that this movie would decide to keep that element. I was also concerned about the way in which Frank Herbert used fatness in much the same way. Herbert relied on Western colonizer stereotypes that forward fat people as intrinsically greedy, impulsive, and violent, as a means of conveying the Baron's intended nature to the readers. Sadly, unlike the homophobia which was abandoned, and rightfully so, the writers and director of last year's Dune decided to keep Herbert's fatphobia, adding it to the mountain of blockbusters reliant on this and similar forms of physical othering. By taking this route and presenting the Baron as your stereotypical evil fat man, the creators fail in 2 ways. For a start, they exploit the social prejudice against fat people for their own personal gain, using fatphobia as a cheap means of cutting narrative corners. After all, the more they fall back on social prejudice, the less time, money, and effort they have to put into actually showing the Harkonnens' evil nature through their actions. It is lazy money grubbing that comes at the direct expense of fat people. Because, on top of that, the movie reinforces the very same prejudice it is reliant on, as we, the audience, see the few terrible things we are shown being carried out in the name of the Baron. We are having our fatphobia subconsciously validated by the movie. We're being told that our hatred of fat people is justified, that there's a good reason for our anti-fat prejudice, creating a vicious feedback loop. And this is something with real-life consequences, not only impacting the way we as society perceive fat bodies, but how we treat fat people. The constant barrage of anti-fat propaganda leads to discrimination in all areas of life, such as work, medicine, and education. It really is horrific when you begin to listen to fat people and learn just how much trauma they are made to endure each day by the rest of us in society. Just to give a clear and quantifiable example of this, in the US, women who are 1 standard deviation above the average weight are paid $10,000 less each year for the same amount of labor as their thinner counterparts, a number that almost doubles to $19,000 for those 2 standard deviations above. Keep those statistics in mind going forward, as they will be important later on. Point is, there is no justification for any of this. Not only is long-term weight loss not viable for most people, even if it were, there is nothing inherently bad about being fat. It is just another natural variation in the human mosaic. Of course, I have seen a fair few attempts to justify Dune's fatphobia being made online, and would feel remiss if I didn't take a couple of minutes to shoot them down. Starting, of course, with the popular assertion that rich people are just known to be fatter, therefore it makes sense for the Baron to be fat. I'm just going to read out a few names while showing photographs of said people, and I want you to see if you can figure out what connects them all. Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Bernard Arnold, Bill Gates, and Mark Zuckerberg. These are, of course, the 5 richest people on the planet. They are also all thin white men. In fact, we have to go all the way to number 10 to see the first person on this list who isn't what we in the West would consider thin. Though I'd hesitate to call him fat either, he's just kinda average for his age, and that's Mukesh Ambani. This of course adds a layer of complexity in the fact that Ambani is not only Indian, but he comes from a generation where having some meat, as my wife put it, was seen as a desirable trait. It's only in our generation, with the rapid growth of Bollywood and the advent of the internet, that fatphobia has become more prominent in India. So he really is the anomaly on the list. I guess what I'm trying to get at here is, where's my Baron Bezos? Give me Bezos and his unfortunately shaped rocket, you fucking cowards. He is quite literally our first space capitalist. So not only do fat people face clear economic discrimination as shown earlier with statistics, but the wealthiest people on this planet, those who are readily destroying the very earth we stand on, are thin white dudes. And it's not like we aren't socially aware of this fact. In the words of Dr. Himmelstein, quote, "Thin is now considered upper class, signifying that you have lots of spare time to think about what you eat, prepare food and exercise, and ample funds to buy fresh, whole, non-processed foods." End quote. Again, people largely can't control their body size, but that is the perception. Which leads me to the conclusion that people making this argument are very rarely doing so in good faith. They're instead simply using it as a thin veil for their hate. That's not to say that's the case for everyone. I don't doubt that there are those with this mindset, and in fact, it wouldn't surprise me if more left-leaning people took this view, due to the way fatphobia was a central aesthetic in 20th and 21st century anti-cap imagery, but thinness in contemporary white Western society is generally perceived as upper class. Another argument I've heard being made is that the Baron is fat as a quasi-historic representation of feudal society in space. Kind of like how I talked about my need for colourful armour designs in my previous video. The problem with this argument, however, is that it leaves one questioning why the Baron is, by most standards, the only fat lord in this entire movie. If the design team had made Paul and Leto Atreides as well as Lady Jessica fat, played by fat actors, I think we'd be having a very different conversation. Yes, there will still be a conversation to be had by fat people, since, spoiler, the Atreides aren't the good guys either, but there'd be more nuance than there currently is. And just to clarify why I keep specifying fat characters need to be played by fat actors, when a fat person is played by a thin person in a fat suit, not only is that taking away one of the few roles fat actors are permitted to play by a fatphobic industry, nobody is casting fat people to play thin people, but the thin actor also brings their prejudice to that role. Whether they realize it or not, their perception of fat people will impact their movement, speech, and mannerisms in the same way that a neurotypical or cis actor playing a neurodivergent or trans character would. History has made things very clear. The results of a non-marginalized person playing a marginalized role are never pretty. Another point that Ali from OK to be Fat pointed out when I had them check my script is the way in which a thin actor putting on a fat suit and then taking it off to walk down the red carpet visually reinforces this notion that the fat parts of the body are actually a suit that can be easily removed. This suggests that fat people simply haven't done so, with the implication being that they're too lazy to do something that is both simple and easy. And speaking of Ali, if you'd like to learn more about fatphobia from someone far more qualified to speak on the matter than I will ever be sure to check out her wonderful work. As a starting place, I suggest checking out her piece breaking down the ways in which J.K. Rowling uses Dudley's fatness in the Harry Potter franchise as justification for both physically and mentally scarring an 11-year-old boy. Because that's how normalized fatphobia is in society, that it can be used to make what are now predominantly full-grown adults cheer when a reportedly kind adult physically alters the body of a child, leading said child to require surgery. And to be clear, that last part is not speculation. J.K. Rowling made the fact that Dudley needed surgery in order to remove his tail explicitly clear in her books. From there, you can progress to Ali's work on BMI and bogus morbidity statistics. Also, just a quick heads up for anyone commenting on this issue, any comments using the O word that is used as a means to pathologize fatness will not be making it through. Not on this video or any other video on any of the channels I work on, as is the standard for all slurs. It just hasn't come up in my work thus far, so I wanted to make that standard clear now that it has. Sadly, fatphobia is not the only form of physical othering in the movie, which leads me on to my second point, the way in which it stigmatizes those with albinism. And if you'd like to hear more about that, you can do so by clicking the link at the top of the video description to access the full video found on my personal channel. Don't worry, said link is timestamped to where we left off, and there are no ads on the channel, meaning that this will be the last time your viewing is interrupted. I just thought this was a good way to earn something for the work I put into the video, whilst also growing my personal channel. I'll be using said channel for any personal projects, things that don't exactly fit on this one. No schedule or anything, just whenever I can and feel like it, so yeah, be sure to check that out. If you like what we do here, then please consider becoming one of our wonderful patrons who make all this possible. On that note, we'd just like to thank the following people: Matthew Kovac, Hannah Banghart, Gerrit Van Voors, Cthulhu, Sosh Daniels, Higgins the Seagull, and Flynn. And with that said, take care now.